Well, thank you. Thank you, Sameer. Really appreciate the quick primer on analytics. Now, there's been a lot of hype in the last couple of years about analytics, big data analytics. You go and talk to everybody. Everybody has on their resume SAS, and you have Hadoop. And people don't even know what Hadoop is, and they come and tell you, oh yeah, I know Hadoop clusters. They just know how to spell Hadoop, and they talk about, yes, I am a big data analyst. So, so my question to, and I think let's throw it to everybody. Let's starting with you, Iqbal. Is this a big hype, or is this for real? I know you gave a long talk about how this is real, but you are really practicing it out there with all the retail clients. So let's start with you.
I make my living from it, so no,
Yes.
I will not call it a hype. I think the challenge is, as Sameer rightly pointed out, that there is no one common definition of analytics. And it's rightly so, right? I mean, those who have read Tom Davenport or anybody worth their weight in this space, we all know that it's a continuum, starting from your Excel basic reports, MIS, to optimization and forecasting, and now machine learning. All that stuff is analytics. It's just that what's the complexity, what's the data behind it, and the tools that you are using. We all used to run some basic kind of regression in Excel. Today, Excel cannot handle large quantities of data, so you use a different tool, and which means that you need people who are different in terms of their skill set, right? It is when we all, I'm not sure how old everybody else is here, but I remember the first computer that I worked on and the RAM on that, and now the hard disk of that computer is the RAM on my phone. So it just shows how technology has changed and how the definition of analytics has changed. Data was always big. Data will always stay big. The tools have changed. We can handle it today. We couldn't handle it earlier.
Right. What about you, Amit?
So I think I will be amazed if anybody sitting on this table will say that this isn't hype. But having said this, I will look at it a different perspective. What happens is that when we do a specific kind of work, sooner or later we will hit the saturation. I don't have any other way to improve it further. Now, how can I improve my decision making to the next step? How can I still differentiate? And I think that's where analytics come into play. And to do that, and all of us understand a bit of that, we will try to get more data, we'll try to get more information, so that I can take slightly more informed decision. That's the basic we all follow, because my saturation has happened at the stage where it is right now. Now, that's, I think, will define that this is a field which will hardly ever see in saturation or will ever cease to grow, because as soon as you saturate to a specific level, like Iqbal said, you used to make a simple logistic regression model. Now that's got saturated, commoditized. You will start thinking, oh, can I actually get some more data, which may be slightly more unstructured, and can I work with that? You will start, about 2 years back when this unstructured data thing started coming in, it was limited to social data. Now you got social data. Oh, can I actually get machine data also? Because I can still make some differentiated decision out of it, which perhaps my competition is not making. And that will perhaps keep this whole thing going in terms of improvement of overall analytics as an industry. Having said this, I also believe that for some reason, particularly the Western media has been slightly more kind on analytics as a buzzword compared to some of the other buzzword which is moving around. I don't know whether Howard paid for it or somebody paid for it, but the media was slightly more kind, which has helped us to create that kind of a gap. Because all of us has been doing analytics from the time we have been working. I don't remember anybody can ask for any question without using Excel sheet today. And all of us been doing Excel sheet. What are you doing? You are trying to find some insight from the numbers and trying to make a decision based on that. Numbers have changed. As Iqbal said, it's become bigger. You started using different tools. It become unstructured. You started building different tools. So that's how that evaluation will happen.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. I mean, there's a movie, Moneyball, that was all about analytics in sports, and MIT Sloan has a sports analytics conference. So you don't know whether it's a hype by Harvard Business Review or is it really happening. So let's give it to you, Sameer.
Well, I think one of the first thing I was looking at the panel and kind of taking a look. Iqbal, Amit, me, we've all worked together. So it's very difficult when you know the people to take a very contrarian view. And that's a good job by Marticus, because professors are never controversial. So I'm assuming that the reply will be the same. But I think there are a couple of analogies, and I'll link to what Amit and Iqbal said, that if you look at the whole, what we say, the quantum of data, Delta Airlines, a single flight from Heathrow to, let's say, JFK generates about 10 terabyte of data. This was 10 years back about just 2 terabyte. Now, the volume, the quantum has gone up, but there is another analogy is that 50%, and this is a stated report, 50% of the big data projects are aborted. So on one side, there is immense appetite when you look at the quantum or whatever we say, 5V, 6Vs. We also don't know till what time the whole vocabulary of Vs will come down. But it's not about what we say the hype, and what we say in our own parlance is the big data zoo. Mahout, Cassandra, Python, these are all something what you find in a different place than kind of in analytics. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about what we say, not the usage of tools or the applications or the product. It's how about the customer is able to relate in terms of the final output. And this is where I link to what Amit said, that even if it's a small kind of an Excel sheet with 5 bullets and saying this is what is the final key takeaway from the project what we did under big data, and the client can be able to relate to that, it's perfectly fine. I think that's my 2 cents on this.
Well, analytics is a set of methods, a class of methods which together are called analytics. Well, this set of tools, why is it that suddenly we are using a different phrase, analytics? Certain things have happened over the last 10 years. The computational power has grown and grown exponentially. Second, data availability has happened. And third, there are people who now are able to model, create statistical models which can use the computing power and relate the data with the needs of the clients. Hence, this new field of analytics is born. So analytics is very much true, very much here to stay, and very much is going to add value to the clients if used correctly. Or else, as you know, in the story of Alice in Wonderland, Alice meets a cat. The cat asks, "Where do you want to go?" Alice says, "I don't know." Then the cat says, "Then it doesn't matter." So if you know what you want from analytics, it's a big value add. It's a big value add at all levels of the value chain. And the breathtaking speed at which new statistical models are coming up, the kind of publications which are happening in analytics journals is phenomenal. Now, new impact factor journals, impact factor as in number of citations. The people who read those journals, more than one impact factor, increase. The growth of China is just not in manufacturing. The growth of China is also in publications. Much of it is happening in analytics. So analytics is here to stay. The class of models are continuously evolving, and this is an evolving science. Right. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, I think the next question is to both Amit and Sameer. Starting with you, Amit. Let's hypothetically, I'm a retailer, and I have tons and tons of data. I have got last 20 years of data, and I just don't know what to do with it. I'm Alice in Wonderland. I don't know where to go with this. But I do know that analytics is going to give me the edge over everybody else, at least for some time. So how do I go about setting up a analytics-centric organization? Any words of wisdom on that?
So I think it's a really interesting question, and my personal 2 cents are that's where we actually go wrong. Because we actually say that I have data, let me figure out what this data is going to tell me. It's not literally that way. I think Sameer put it fairly well. If I don't know which problem I'm trying to solve, I don't know with the heap of data which data I need to go and pull out. I don't know what decision I'm going to make. So the focal point here is the decision which you need to make. Predominantly, we talked about, Sameer in his keynote talked about talent and talent not being available. There's no shortage of talent which can play with the data. There's a huge shortage of talent which can actually meaningfully play with the data. And the underlying word is the meaningful. Because there are a lot of people who know SQL, there's a lot of people who know SAS, there's a lot of people who will know this and that, very different tools, because they are tool people, which is much more commoditized. But until unless they know what they are going to do, which insight they are looking for, and how that insight can actually be used in a practical way or can be applied for the business decision making, you will never get the insight which you want. And the data is so huge, as you perhaps said also, all the organizations are sitting with plethora of data. Means one thing which has happened in the last 10 years, to add what professors actually said, the computing part, the power is one part. The other power which has happened is we had this whole craze of collecting data. So we started collecting whatever we can collect. Oh, this is another thing which I can collect, let's collect it. Or this can also I can collect, let's collect it. And we started, so now my data heap is so huge, until unless I know where and how I need to dissect it, I will not get the output. And I think that's where the adoption question is, that I should know what I want to do. Means my sense is that 2 years down the line, somebody else will know more about you than you will know about yourself, undoubtedly. Because there's so much of data which you have left outside of your preview, outside of your control, and if somebody starts analyzing it, he can tell you anything and everything what you want to know about yourself, literally. And I think that's where I will say, I will not use this thing, but that's the threat of where the analytics may actually go until unless it's been controlled and used in the way where it's actually improved the businesses.
Thanks. Before I hand it over to you, Sameer, I'd like to actually have Iqbal comment on this, given your experience with Target and Lowe's and these huge organizations in retail. Can you throw some light on this?
I think it's a big challenge to have an analytics-centric organization, because there are three kinds of people. One who truly believe in analytics, and they are in this room, and you can see how small this room is. Then there are people who hear about this buzzword and they're like, okay, let me figure out what is it about and let me see what it can do. But majority of any organization still believes that the variance and the budget and the plan is the kind of analysis that I know, and they don't want to learn anything beyond that, unknown devil. Nobody wants to know the unknown devil. And what I have struggled with, yes, there is a lot of data challenges there, in the sense that the quality isn't great. If you want 100 variables, you have 20. If you want 10, you have only 9. But we can get past all that. We can get the talent. Talent is not an issue. Yes, we can even get people who can meaningfully play with data. We can even convince business to figure out the problem and give it to us. But we can't force business to implement it. More often than not, a true analytic solution that can deliver value to the business means business needs to change the way it works today. Simple forecast, right? In any organization, sales department has their forecast, finance department has their forecast, HR department has their forecast. Integrated forecast seems like a dream that will probably never come true for most organizations. Is it very difficult? No. We can get an integrated forecast, but each of these teams would still have their own forecast and use that to make their business decisions. And then at the CXO level meeting, they'll be all like, that doesn't make sense to me because my numbers are X and yours are Y. And they will all track different variance and budget and plan, things like that. So I think the challenge is that unless people realize the value of true analytics and use it to make their day-to-day lives more efficient, when it truly becomes, to Sameer's points, embedded, pervasive and invisible, analytics is not successful. It's not a particular output that we can force down somebody's throat. It should be something that becomes part of our life. 20 years back, people didn't imagine that, computers would become such an important part of everybody's life. We still used to work on paper. 10 years back, nobody knew that you can work without a computer and a small piece of device will have everything that you need. But change has happened over time, and that's what needs to happen in this space, where as more people use analytics, as they show value to their peers, that's when, we truly have an analytics-centric organization.
So to get to the embedded, pervasive and invisible analytics for my retail organization, how would you or Cognizant go about advising me on that?
Well, I think what we have learned, a simple lesson in analytics is make it simple. I think we have some problem in making this field a very esoteric field. I think to the stage where the client will say, okay, can you, I'm a retail client, the example what you said, so a simple conversation, okay, can you please tell how analytics can solve or rather augment the sales for my organization? We'll start with, okay, we can do merchandising analytics for you, we can do stockouts, we can do assortment planning, and by the way, there's something called supply chain analytics, and we will lace everything together, do upstream, downstream data, and produce results. Now that's a conversation that doesn't fly with the clients. For some reason, we always keep on saying that analytics guys need not be storytellers. They just need to understand the business, the challenge of the clients, and usually the challenge of the clients comes out in the conversation when you start a client meeting. The first 5 minutes of the client are good enough to know the pulse, what the client wants. Rest, if you're able to contextualize, relate, problem solved. Honestly, clients don't get bothered whether you use neural network or a simple logistic regression. That's your problem. If they were aware about these things, they would have done it at their own end. I think that's where the whole simplification, honestly, the words I used, we used to, I would say, back the business. We never used to convert that business into execution. So that's my piece.
Thank you. Now, great. My organization is now analytics centric, and I kind of understand that I need to hire some talent. So I'm going to kind of open this out to this panel, and starting with you, Iqbal, and then kind of going all the way over to Sujoy. I want to understand what kind of talent I want to hire, I should be looking at, and of course we're going to come to Ematicus to hire all of this talent, right? And then kind of go over Amit, Sameer, and then Sujoy, if you can talk about some of the curriculum that people should be focusing on. Starting with you, Iqbal.
So I will just qualify my answer with one thing. I'm neither a statistician nor a programmer, so you may want to keep that in mind while listening to what I'm saying. I have been in analytics space for past 15 years, and one thing that I have learned that, and I think Amit made that statement in Hindi very nicely, which I won't repeat here, but we need somebody who has analytical ability. SAS, statistics are, in my opinion, are tools, technologies, they can be taught. Right, the technology that we used 20 years back is not being used anymore, and a lot of people have upgraded to new technologies and new tools. But analytical ability cannot be really taught, especially not in a corporate world, because there isn't time or the bandwidth. In general, corporates don't have that kind of even infrastructure to build something like an analytical ability. So for me, the focus would be buy analytical ability. If they have technical skill set like statistics background, they know SAS or R, great. And build on the business domain, because each organization has some slight different business model. Their data has its own idiosyncrasy, so you have to learn their data variables and things like that. That would be my 2 cents.
Terrific. Amit?
So if I look at an ideal guy, which somehow does not exist, but I'm looking for someone who has a balanced combination of 4 skills, literally. Somebody who understands domain well, somebody who understands function well, somebody who understands technology, and he may not, I'm not saying expert in any one of them, I'm saying understand, and somebody who understands numbers. Again, I'm not at all saying that he needs to be a statistical expert or somebody who's a neural scientist or simply, now the problem is to get somebody who has all of these 4 skills is next to impossible. It's fairly rare commodity in the market space. So what you do is that you actually get more talent, and within a group of people you try to balance the skills. But if you don't have these 4 skills balanced out, chances are that whatever you may build as an analytics capability, you will not get the desired output. And all 4 of them are extremely important. Chances are that somebody who understands numbers may or may not be a statistical guy or an operation research guy or a technical guy. Somebody who understands technology may not be completely an engineer, because he needs to understand technology. And thankfully, the technologies have become far more simpler to use compared to being used by the engineer. Where we have gone, and I think some of the areas where we have struggled in the past is we have gone to figure out, one, this elusive commodity, where will it exist, because it will not exist and we all will fail. And second, we have gone wrong in terms of figuring out, oh, this is hardcore technology, or this is hardcore mathematics, or statistics, mathematics. Mathematics is still a broader term, statistics. When we become so narrow in terms of our selection or our decision making, chances are that we will end up hiring a wrong guy, kind of a thing. And that's where I will put the talent piece, what you need an analytics person.
Thank you. Sameer?
I'll make it outside of what Amit and Iqbal mentioned. I think what I see a gap today, and that's where on a lighter vein I say there is a lot of common linkage between politics and analytics. It's not that they're ending with CS in both the cases, but politics is all about on-the-job training. I mean, there are no training schools over there. I think the same situation I can say is for analytics. I mean, you can do any kind of a training, contextual, technical, business, model, but unless the person is able to relate on the projects, it could be even a historical set of the projects, unless the person is able to relate what it means for the client in those situations, the whole fallacy of finding a right guy or a true kind of data or data scientist will always be, as Amit said, elusive. Anecdotally, if I take an example, we did a project with a large life insurance client in Japan, first project for us last year, and we had huge challenges in terms of convincing the clients what should be the value. So we said, okay, we'll send one of our best data scientists, a guy with 18 years of experience, and he is a guy we kind of vouch across the whole categories of business he can bring value. First day in his office, I received an escalation mail from the head of that insurance saying that the guy turned late 5 minutes in the meeting and is no longer required. Now in Japan, turning late for the meeting is as criminal as anything. The guy told me, the data scientist, I did my job by turning on time. I said, you were 5 minutes late. Now that's something a training can't teach. It's not about the cultural nuances. It's all about, if you're not knowing the pulse of the client, you're not on the job in terms of the right training, these situations will bound to happen.
Thanks, Sujay. If we can get some of your input on the curriculum that we would need.
Yeah. Beyond what has been said, somebody who's working with analytics should be able to visualize data. Somebody who is willing to dirty his or her hands with the data, somebody who is willing to explore the data, look at the possibilities which are there in the data, and try to find out that data which is not there, beyond the 4 skills which have been talked about. An example is a project which was done with the industry. A simple logistic regression model was built, and one variable was more important than the other variables in that logistic regression equation. Now the solution to this problem is to give a weight to that variable which is more important than the other weights. Now what should be the weight? The client has not given those weights. So now either you go to the client or you go to the field or you use your own domain to understand the weights. So this is where your problem solving skill comes. This is a key skill which is required.
So, so coming back to that, so obviously this requires a lot of, as you mentioned, domain expertise and kind of going deep into whether it's in the insurance sector, whether it's the retail sector, what kind of weights need to be placed onto certain parameters and what kind of models you need to run. Are we today in a position to, are we building this talent? Or are we in a position to build this talent? Or are we there? Or are we already there yet? Or will we get there sometime? Or will we not get there at all?
Whatever the level of technology or the statistical modeling which is there in the journals, always we are dealing with incomplete data. Data is never complete. So we have to make some assumptions and then fill in those gaps and then handle the model. Now this calls for problem solving skills, which is the key skill in analytics.
So coming to this point, especially when you're dealing with the kind of analytics that get kind of given over to consultants or even to people who are going through or graduating from colleges into entry-level positions. I doubt if they have the ability or the sort of freedom to use assumptions to come up with certain to kind of complete the data set or complete the model. So in that case, how would someone who's graduating from IIT Kharagpur kind of deal with this?
Right. The curriculum would have a lot of projects. Projects would have real-time data from the clients, which are obviously masked because we have an ND. Now these masked data, as I told earlier, are not complete, and the client has told this is the kind of a decision the client needs. Now the student working in a group, say 2 or 3, they are required to handle those problems with incomplete data. Solving these problems and going and telling that story as was talked about. Tell the story. Telling the story, understanding the client's needs, empathizing with the client, that really helps the students to be able to perform from day one.
Let me give it over to you, Iqbal. In your experience of hiring talent, how do you deal with entry-level talent who doesn't have that freedom, and then is also, are you trying to develop them into something really solid in terms of analytics? So how would you go about it?
I'll go back to the same thing. If you have the raw material, then all it needs is the right environment and classroom training and on-the-job experience. I am a firm believer that at least 2/3 of the training happens on the job. And I think if we see if we look at our education system, there is a lot of stress on learning, but as we as we graduate out of our schools and colleges, after that, the only things we probably read are newspaper and stuff on our tablet devices. So one thing that I've realized is that yes, if we provide in the beginning some basic training, two, if we ensure that the managers of these fresh hires are patient and are providing them with the right projects, assignments, so that these people get exposure to different elements of doing analysis, and last but not the least, create an environment where it is okay to do some research on net about a technique, or it's okay to read a book. In my first job, I was told, just get back to your basics. I mean, it was a finance job, and I had learned cash flows, but I had never done cash flows of a company, and I had to do that, and I was not able to figure out what I'm doing wrong here. So I realized that learning environment is something very critical to a field that's as changing as analytics. Things change in analytics space on a daily basis, and the talent has to stay in touch with whatever is happening, and not just your analysts, but as managers, as leaders, we should stay abreast of whatever is happening in the outside world. So 3 things: right basic training in the beginning, a lot of on-the-job projects and assignments, and last but not the least, create the right culture of learning.
Great. So a lot of hunger to kind of dig deeper into what the problem is and then being able to solve that problem. Now, in my hiring experience, we've kind of come across a lot of notions that, hey, you should only be hiring from IIT, and if you're hiring from an IIT computer science background, make sure you're hiring from IIT Bombay and nowhere else. I'm sorry, not IIT Kharagpur, but that is something that I've been told. But sorry, please go ahead.
Incidentally, IIT Kharagpur has got today the highest rank in computer science in India.
Terrific. I should go and change that next time somebody tells me that. But in this, and I'll give it to you, Amit, and then probably Sujoy can also rebut that. Is that true? Or is it okay to go with, say, someone with a bachelor's in operations research, and you can train that person up and kind of get them up to speed with what an IIT from Bombay or Kharagpur will be able to provide you, that kind of talent?
So I think you asked this from the wrong person, because I'm a very, very strong believer that there's so much a degree can do you, but it's more about what you want to learn and how you want to learn and how you want to apply that. Obviously, IITs give you a specific environment. It helps you to learn some of the technical part of it. But as all of us were saying, I think everybody was kind of unanimous saying technical part is only so much. The differentiation comes in the non-technical, the softer part of it, which is more dependent on the individual attitude rather than the degree which he has, literally. I think also something which perhaps earlier Sujoy and Iqbal was saying, see, one of the misconception we have is that when I have an analytics talent, or let's say more specifically predictive analytics talent, we say, oh, it does not need human being because he will anyway predict what's going to happen tomorrow. Now, if he's going to predict what's going to happen tomorrow, then he should be God, not a data scientist. Very simple. It can't happen because you can never get a 100% probability of any kind of a prediction which you're going to make. That's where it is. You can be quite close, and the level of closeness will depend on how much he knows technically, as well as what Sujay said, or you said, how much hunger he has to figure out, to gap that 1 or 2% which he does not know, how much he will try to get more data, more information to cover that gap. I don't think this is in any way going to replace the decision making which human beings take. It's basically an aid to decision making which all of us take. That's conception needs to be clear, because we try to automate everything and think everything will happen by automatically. That's not the catch which is going to happen.
Thanks. Yes.
Actually, it's very true, very correct. The degree really doesn't matter. I had an ex-colleague of mine, and he worked his life in US at the time when data analytics was emerging, big time in US. His boss was an English graduate. Fine. And that boss of his, she was one of the most brilliant minds in that field in the country. So the degree really doesn't matter.
Just to add to what Sujay said, there are 3 people sitting on the panel. I don't know about Sujay. Sameer I know well, Iqbal I know, myself. They are all management guys, done some marketing or some finance functions rather than doing statistics or operation research in our past life. I've been doing analytics for about 17, 18 years. She's doing about 15, 17 years. Sameer is doing the same.
4 of us. That makes 4 of us.
4 of us. So I think it's more about trying to figure out how you want to solve this problem and how much intuitiveness you have, and also along with that hunger and patience you have to find the solution, which will decide whether you will be successful or not. Techniques definitely useful, but it's easy to learn. The attitude is difficult to learn.
Great. Now, Sameer, a lot of times, not a lot of times actually, one of the biggest assets that one can have as a data scientist is to be able to tell that story with what is that insight telling us about the business. How much of it, I actually had one of our customers tell us, what is all this big data and analytics? I can weave a story around the kind of insights we want and give it to the organization. So I can weave the data, I can massage the data and manipulate the data any which way and come up with the analysis that I want to show. So how much of that is true, and how much of that is kind of sort of at the surface, and beyond that there is a lot of depth to data analytics?
I think it's a tough question, and the way I see this whole piece, what you mentioned, Sujoy, is I think this is one industry I keep on saying, as long as the clients are able to figure out what they want, which they aren't, and as far as the people, the talent knows what they want to do, which in most of the cases don't, I think it's a win-win situation. The day everyone figures out, but as we say, it's quite sustainable. I think there's still more, many years left, because I think it's a fantastic industry. To the point what you mentioned, I think, to me, I would say it's an evolution of analytics. The way we have seen a structured data getting into analytics, which was earlier MIS to BIDW to kind of, let's say, diagnostic to kind of prescriptive to predictive analytics, to me, a data modeler was getting into a cliche stage. Plus, we also had a lot of unstructured data with a big data kind of a, let's say, reverberation. You combine and say, okay, can I rebrand something on the data modeler side? That's where the data scientists came into the picture. Of course, the facets, the dimensions, the elements, the components change, because the industry has gone through a huge change from where we say that the data proliferation and deluge is the most complex problem for the enterprises to solve, because you can't massage, parse, filter data unless you know what exactly needs to be done. I think to me it's a remorphed format of data modeler, but the essence today is a data scientist truly is a person for me who is more agile than that data modeler who was just looking at data and saying, okay, I can fix the problem. Here it's more in a more consulting, more kind of a prescriptive manner.
Where we have to go step 1 to step 2 to step 3 or to step 4, the people directly plunge into step 5. Means one of the bank in India I was working with, they have a risk model which is supposedly much more accurate than one BOFA has in America, because they build it now. And they don't have to go through all of those legacy issues of building it version 1 and the version 2 or the version 3. Some of the loyalty programs which retailers run in India is far, far superior to the loyalty programs which have been run globally. Again, because we don't have to go through that. We have seen all the learnings, and that learnings get adopted here. So I think that's where we're going to move, and that's how the industry will evolve.
Sure. Thank you. Sameer?
I think I'll start with the lighter side and then on the serious note, and it's a Friday, I can realize. You're cold. Okay, I'll make it quick. The lighter side is as long as the bell curves are there in the organization, people will be uneasy in analytics, and the more push of challenging the status quo will come in. That's bound to happen because I think we all know what an EA rater versus an EM rater gets, and I think that's pushing in a mode where I think the guys are saying, okay, let me stretch and challenge what I can learn. The second piece, again on the lighter side, is there got to be a training, and maybe Emoticus can help. Who can do a training for the decision maker in analytics? We always talk about the talent, but the guys who are taking decisions or the enterprises which are adopting analytics, can there be a training for them? I'll give a small example how it triggered a large analytics project in a large Indian bank, very recent. The CEO of the Indian bank got a text at 11:30 at night saying, the CEO of the Indian bank saying, would you like to apply for a two-wheeler loan? We can give you instant kind of a quick loan. Now the CEO castigated the whole team in the morning saying, if I'm spending millions on personal campaigns, recommendation engines and analytics, why the hell I'm getting a two-wheeler loan kind of a text message? That triggered a project record by itself. It was a kind of a funny situation where the CEO is getting the thing. But on the serious side, I think we continue to hold a 44% share. Analytics market, if you take the count, which is authenticated by markets and markets.com, 96 billion is the current market size. And I'm talking about embedded, pervasive, I mean, any words you want to put or acronyms over there. It would leapfrog to 125 billion by 2017 at a compounded growth rate of 25% almost. Within that, big data analytics is close to about 35 billion itself, growing at 14-15% at a CAGR piece. Now, these figures will hold good, will grow, but if you take the percentage of the share of India, it will continue to kind of be, I would say, on a supreme, numero uno kind of a position. What is important, I think what Iqbal and Amit mentioned, as long as we know how to challenge ourselves and take those leaps in terms of the next challenge, I think we are good.
Professor?
Adding to what they have said, there is a challenge which is coming to us from Eastern Europe, and the challenge is in model creation. Now, Eastern Europe has had a legacy of probabilists. They have been born in Eastern Europe, and they're renowned probabilists, starting from Russia to all the Slavic countries, Italy, Czech Republic, and so on. Now, at that level, we are facing a challenge. Now, there's a huge opportunity, as was mentioned. The opportunity is that we have a huge requirement in the industry, and there's a extreme need of a trainer who would be able to train the people at all levels of the value chain to be able to take up responsible positions in the industry. So that's a huge opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for your time. Just a few minutes for the audience to throw their questions at us. Do you have a mic? Anybody?
Hi. Just as an introduction, I'm Karthik Kumar from Jardine Lloyd Thompson. I head the Knowledge Services Division at JLT in Mumbai. I was recently watching an interview with, I think this was on YouTube or something like that, with Dheeraj Rajaram of Mu Sigma in one of his do's, I guess, where he was talking about this whole concept of extreme experimentation and how the most beneficial firms are going to be those that can attempt this in the smartest and the most cost-effective manner. My question is, I mean, having heard a lot of what you were talking about, how does this get incorporated? What are the best models that organizations could be adopting, to kind of fast track this, I suppose?
Let me actually throw that about extreme experimentation. Iqbal actually could perhaps talk about the target experiment we just talked about in the afternoon, and that was a case of extreme experimentation from Target. If you could just talk about that and how that could then be incorporated in some other organization. Sure. Sameer?
And we usually share banters. That's a good part of knowing each other. I think it's a fundamental aspect today that the industries are changing, I think in a way which was not thought few years back. Take the example of Netflix, the whole piece of entertainment industry, Airbnb on the hotel side, taxi aggregators like Uber. Now, as long as these models keeps changing, the whole, I would say, undercurrents of social, mobile, analytics, cloud, IoT will also come in. And maybe the digital piece, which is an overarching layer. Now, can we say that, can we form or conceptualize the best practices around these models? I don't think so. The industries today are living, as we say, the whole VUCA kind of a, let's say, factor. There is no set best practices available which can actually say, okay, this is how you should go about adopting these things. A classic case, in spite of 10, 15 years in the industry, with all due regards, analytics does not have a standard model definition. And that's the reason, to the question what you asked, I think we will be living into this, we'll be coming out with those new models, strategic pieces, how to kind of create. I think the beauty will lie that there'll be new monetization opportunities which will emerge.
I think for me, I don't know whether I will use the word extreme experimentation, but analytics as a stream, it's pretty new for us. When I'm saying new, yes, statistics has been around for years. I mean, the theories that we use have been around for far longer than most of us in this room. But analytics as a science has not really fully evolved till now, primarily because we have till now not figured out how to use the entire data that's available to us. We always take whatever bite we can take, and we chew on that, and whatever flavor we get out of that, we are okay with that till we figure out, okay, now I can take a bigger bite and chew more and look at more things. So the big data, the Hadoop, they are just ways, as Professor Sujoy said, we have more computational power. And till the time things are not stable, till the time everything around us is evolving, everything will remain an experiment. To the extent everything is still a probability. When you are predicting something, you do forecasts just to prove them wrong. If you have high loss forecast, you say, oh, I can't accept it, do something to reduce losses. If you have a low sales forecast, you want to do something to increase sales. At the end of it, analytics is all about using innovative ways to inform the business decision, and that's half the fun of it. I mean, otherwise it will be just as boring as doing a balance sheet analysis. No pun intended here. I've done that quite a few years myself. So I would say that yes, experimentation is important, simply because we probably have not even scratched 1% of analytics.
Sure, thank you. I'd actually like to just personally talk about that. It was extreme experimentation by President Obama's team in 2012 that won him the election. I'm not sure if too many people know, but they used every form of data that was available on every single individual in the country and the difference between the two sides was Romney had 3 data scientists, Obama had 58 data scientists working for him. And eventually, I mean, the results were there to see, but for everyone, but they ran 150 to 160 simulations every single night with every new data point to see what was that data point going to do to the election in every single state. So,
did they predict the fate of his second term also through
I'm sure they already have.
I just want to add to that example. So one of the clients that I worked for is Disney, and at that point in time they were still in the process of implementing the RFID thing to be used bands for people who are entering the Disney theme parks. The amount of data that they are collecting through it is mind-blowing. There is so much that can be done from it. So for instance, you can figure out what is the route different kind of people take through the theme park. What is their preference of the rides, where they stand in the merchandise store, in Disney merchandise store, in front of which aisle or which particular item would they spent more time deciding, and which particular item they picked up really fast, how much time they spent in each queue, which restaurant they exactly spent, and so imagine the data that is there. And to Amit's point, Disney would definitely know more about these people once it analyzes the data, and that's the experimentation part, because the better we know our customer, the better we know our supplier, the better we know our end user, we can just ensure that we have just the right product, just the right solution, and we can continue to keep our customer engaged with us. And that's another reason for continuously experimenting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And actually, to add to your point, is they've been able to innovate the experience. So what happens is you can go put your wristband tag and then walk away without having to stand in the queue, right? And then based on the number of people who keep coming, when your turn comes up, you'll get an alert telling you that, okay, in the next 5 minutes you can go back and take your ride. So that itself is on the innovation side, and they're using analytics to enable that.
Correct. Anybody else?
Analytics. So I have two questions, in fact, one from Sameer. Sameer, everybody is talking about this big data, and there is a lot of hype around that, and I do believe that there is no end to this data explosion. So I was quite interested in mind when you mentioned data economy in your presentation. So I would like you to deliberate something around that, because there is a huge sea of data. So what does the data economy mean? Because I think that is going to give a lot of direction in future, given its data explosion. And second question is to Professor, that we have seen analytics industry growing, and there is a never-ending need for this more and more analytics over there. How do you see statistics as a discipline growing? Do you see the statistics as a discipline has also grown, or you think that it is the same theoretical getting application in new area? So these two questions. Thanks.
An analogy. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Mahabharata. Right. Now the condition for Mahabharata
In the mythological series?
in the mythology, no, yeah, the text of Mahabharata. Right. So the text of Mahabharata, Vyasa conceives the text. He thinks of the text and he says, I want somebody to write the text. So who is the person who is fit to write the text? There's only one person who can write the text, and that is Ganesh. Fine. Ganesh, the Hindu god. So Vyasa goes to Ganesh and says, I'm going to dictate, you write it down. So Ganesh says, fine, I'll write it down, but there's a condition. There's a catch. I write very quickly. I'm a fast writer. Should you dictate and I complete, and then you don't have words, I'll stop writing. The Mahabharata writing ends. So what does Vyasa do? Vyasa, the moment he has to think of a new, the whole Mahabharata is a poetry, like the Iliad is a poetry. Right? So this is Indo-European poetry. So this Indo-European poetry, Vyasa is dictating, and Vyasa talks of a shlok. Ganesh immediately writes down. Then Vyasa thinks of a difficult shlok and lays down a condition that Ganesh has to understand the meaning of the shlok first, and only then he'll write it down. That's the catch. So Ganesh writes down very fast, then he dictates a very difficult shlok. He thinks for a minute, then he writes down. In the meanwhile, Vyasa has been able to think of a new shlok. Fine. So there's a competition between writing down and dictating. Similarly, there's a competition between the statistical models which are now coming in journals and the implementation of those models in, say, R packages. The journal models are coming at such a breathtaking rate that the people who are implementing those models have a lag time. Right. For example, in financial industry, our metrics is one of the most successful from ETH Zurich, the most successful package developers in financial data analytics, are package developers. But if you see the pace at which journal models come and the numerical problems, the solution to those numerical problems, there's a lag. There's a lag of say 3 months or 4 months between the statistical development and the model implementation, which means statistics is moving at a breathtaking pace. Right? We have huge new knowledge coming in statistics. So that's the answer.
I think it's
I'll make it quick on the data economy side. I think it's got to do with the 3 words what we mentioned, the invisible, pervasive, and the embedded analytics. And that's what Tom Davenport meant, where the decisions, as Amit and Iqbal mentioned, in terms of any business or function will be taken on the basis of analytics. It will be a key strategic differentiator, as well as the embedded nature of analytics will mean that it will straddle from not only on the, we say, the sales marketing side, but pretty much touching every function. So when you do that, where the whole tendency to look at analytics as complete pervasive becomes relevant, the whole data economy comes into the picture. And that's why we're saying that it's a time where organizations like Dell, you mentioned about big data. Now, even if I don't believe, if Dell believes and continues to give business to Cognizant Musignal, we are fine. That's perfectly fine. At the end of the day, it's all about, we say, the changing norms and the words in the industry which we all can generate. But as long as Iqbal and Amit and Professor mentioned, if we are able to make an impact to whosoever is giving data to us and able to kind of relate to that problem, I think we're good on that.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Suresh. So I will just go to a little lower down the ladder of analytics, because I have been a product manager with SAP Astral Business Objects have been. So I still see a lot of customers talking about business intelligence. So I know business analytics is still a hype. When I talk to customers who already have BI, so they want me to understand what is it I'm going to get extra out of it. And in this whole 100 billion market, what you're saying, how much still you see BI market?
Amit, do you have any words on that?
So I think there are 2 parts to it. Analytics, or the business analytics, is in a way evolution of what BI used to do. So BI was, let's say, past generation. Analytics is the current generation. Maybe more prescriptive analytics will become the future generation. And that's how the industry is evolving, right? I don't have the exact number of how much is the BI, but purely from numbers perspective or the dollar value perspective, BI market is still far bigger than the overall analytics market or advanced analytics market, as we call it. Having said this, the growth rate of the 2 markets are very different. So the BI market is not growing that much because it's yesterday's thing. The advanced analytics market is supposedly growing much faster than the BI market because they're. Also, you need to look at your clients, right? Clients have a different level of intelligence. There are a large number of clients that still don't know or they don't have a BI system. So obviously, some of them will actually go in a sequential manner, some of them will leapfrog, some of them will try out some different experiments, but literally, is BI market going to die? Not in the near future. But will it change its shape and size? The tools will change? Answer is perhaps yes. And I'm sure you work with BO, so you know that overall contribution or the market share of different tools are changing very rapidly.
Sameer, would you like to comment on that real quick?
Well, I think market-wise, if you look, what I meant was complete analytics. It's got nothing to do with BIDW. We're talking about a $1.4 trillion US dollar spend, which happens in IT. That's the whole large ecosystem of budgets we're talking, and this is all aggregated on global basis. Out of that, we're talking about just 100 billion for analytics. The BIDW market per se is close to about 580, 590 change. So there is a huge 5 times kind of a, let's say, jump they've seen. But as Amit rightly pointed out, I think it's time where the micro strategies, the Informaticas, the Pegas of the world changed to kind of what SAP did through HANA. I mean, they went through also that kind of a challenge, but I think most of them are doing. At some stage it will happen. The whole convergence towards will shift, and maybe at that point of time, no one knows analytics will be at what stage, but it's a continuous evolution.
Thank you. Yes, please.
For the people analytics in DB, Deutsche Bank. First want to compliment the panel, excellent discussions and really insightful. The question to the panel is the pace of analytics keeping in line with the pace of data generation? I mean, we talked about analytics hype, we've talked about terabytes of data being generated in a flight, and so on and so forth. I mean, is it catching up? Is it slowing down? There's huge amount of course, we also there's huge amount of data getting generated. But where are the two curves headed towards?
Iqbal?
Yeah, I think there are two ways of looking at it. When we say, can we analyze all the data that is being generated? Probably yes. We have organizations like NASA analyzing huge quantities of data because they have a use for it. But when we look at our day-to-day businesses, a lot of important decisions are taken using very, very basic information and probably very little insight into what the past has been. The second challenge that we use today relies very heavily on, and rightly so, on what has been the past. But if you see, the last few years are not really have not been very stable, and as a result don't give very good predictions as well. So I would say that in terms of techniques, that we, keeping the technology piece aside, keeping the Hadoop and the Pythons aside, in terms of the pure mathematical techniques, we probably have not evolved in using a lot of new ones simply because there is a lot of basic analytics or a lot of low-hanging fruits that still need to be reaped before we can move on to something next. So a lot of organizations that I have consulted for, worked with, they just need to get their basics right even before we can do higher end of what we know as today's predictive analytics. Omni-channel, multi-channel, omni-channel offer optimization, all that stuff sounds good, but even if we could solve for it, I'm not sure how most of these organizations would implement it.
And I think, Ramesh, if I add 2 points in slightly maybe different perspective. One, as Iqbal said, is the pace of analytics ability to churn the data and manage the data is improving? Answer is yes, perhaps it's catching up. But the challenge is, has the adoption been changing at the same pace? Answer is no. And perhaps one of the reason is very simple. Most of us sitting here in the room run a business, either for ourselves or for someone else. If I do an extra work to churn out a decision which is going to be slightly better than what I churn out without playing with larger amount of data, what is the ROI I get? So it's all, and all of us evaluate all the decisions we take consciously or unconsciously based on the ROI. So what may happen is today, as Iqbal said, some of the decisions we take with very, very basic analytics, because we have been doing it like that. I have much more data today, and we are generating much, much higher data. Can I use the data and improve my decision? Particularly, and that's where the adoption point comes up, the delta which I feel, which I will get in terms of improvement of my decision may actually be far lower than the effort which I will spend in terms of doing it because of various reasons. And that's where the catch starts happening.
How are you doing on time? I guess one last question. One last question. Go.
To that, my name is Arun. I'm in the area of talent analytics. I think we need to decouple the words big data and analytics. I think there's a huge conflation of these two words, right? The way I look at it, big data is a means to an end. It's data. Hadoop is just, I look at it as, if big data is the petrol, Hadoop is the nozzle that gets it into the car and into a reasonable sized chunk, and the engine's what basically analytics is. And I think when somebody says they do, oh, I know Hadoop and so I do analytics, I think there's a huge confusion that arises because of this.
how you put a structure or a name to the data. It's not the insight. Analytics is actually an insight, right? And similarly, Hadoop is a tool to manage your data. It's not in any way gives you any insight by itself. I don't know that this needs to be decoupled or not, because it's still very much inbuilt, but in terms of differentiation, that's how the differentiation exists. Means you can't generate insight, and if you can't generate insight, you have not done analytics. That's right. So analytics is more closer to insight rather than data per se.
Terrific. I guess this is it. Thank you very much, Iqbal. Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Sameer. Thank you, Professor. Really appreciate your time. I hope everyone enjoyed this session as well, as much as I did. Thank you.